One of the things you kind of learn living in the mountains is you just got to kind of have stuff ready to go. Get your jack, get your tread plates that you have, and a little bit of wood, and you're fine. We actually had everything we needed, and with 2 tries, we got her unstuck.
Well done. Sometimes I get stuck on the side of the road, but it's because there's roaming gangs. But I'm prepared for that too.
But yeah, we watch Kurt Russell. We know how to escape from New York and L.A.
Indeed. Welcome to the Mobile Armored Podcast Show, the podcast that transforms into a Nazi doomsday bunker. My name is Adam Moore, alongside my co-host and best friend, PJ McNerney. How's it going, PJ?
Did we ever think that we would be talking about Nazi doomsday bunkers in an episode of a children's cartoon show from the 80s? It's like, to say it, it's almost like, oh, like we're offending a lot of people. It's like, no, folks, go look at the episode. This is what you got.
We're not making any of this up. I know that you hear us walk through the plot of each episode, and it sounds crazy sometimes, but we are not making anything up. Just watch the episode alongside listening to the podcast.
If anything, I think we're trying to make these people in the best light possible. We married Matt and Gloria because it was the sort of best, most logical, and probably the kindest thing we could have done in Vegas.
Yeah.
We didn't say they're shacking up together. We were like, no, they went there to get married because they're in love, which is clearly what they've been projecting. And so, no, now we've got Hitler in bunkers.
Exactly. It's episode 34, Peril in Paris. Buddy Hawks disguises himself as Venom agent Dagger in order to infiltrate Venom's secret base in Paris. There he uncovers Venom's plan to find a Nazi doomsday machine.
It's not a doomsday machine. They're bombs. I think we can just state they're bombs. Okay. Like, it's not like there's like a giant robot underneath Paris.
No, it's like whoever wrote that didn't actually watch the episode or didn't watch it all the way through. But let's dive into episode 34, shall we? We open on Paris. Ah, gay Paris. The Eiffel Tower, the Louvre, and lots of smog, apparently. It's covered like a light cloud everywhere you look.
It was the 80s, Adam.
Well, meanwhile, we're in the Egyptian wing of the Louvre. Matt, Scott, T-Bob, Buddy Hawks is with them, and a very French curator from the museum are just walking through. Scott and T-Bob are complaining about how early it is. And T-Bob says, before your dad gave them that painting, we could look at it anytime we wanted to. And I was thinking, wow, the entitlement of great wealth.
I love this idea of like a painting that's just sitting there in the Trakker mansion. And like Gloria's like tired of it. And of all the M.A.S.K agents, why invite Buddy on a trip? Did he feel left out? I think this is the first time we've seen Buddy on vacation with Matt. And I kind of just got the feeling he was just being a chauffeur for Scott and T-Bob.
They have both Thunderhawk and Hurricane with them. Maybe they're going on a driving trip through Europe, but we never established that Matt and Buddy are pals. However, in a few episodes back, we theorized how Buddy feels left out on missions all the time. So maybe Matt caught on to it and said, yeah, why don't I bring Buddy with me to Paris?
Also, he can watch T-Bob and Scott, which is what he's going to do. He's going to be a glorified babysitter.
Well, the curator of the museum says the least we could do to thank him is give you all a special tour.
Did you wonder about whatever conversation happened ahead of time between Matt and the curator? Which was like Matt volunteers like, well, I really look forward to that special tour you're going to give me and my son. And it's like curator's like, oh, what? You know, the special tour that I'm getting because I lent you that painting. We don't really do that sort of thing right here. My boy's going to be very disappointed. It would be a shame to have to tell the prime minister about why my boy is crying when we see him. What time works best, Mr. Trakker?
Well, they turn a corner on this special tour. And they come into a room and they find that all the paintings have been flipped around, right? So we're only seeing the backs of the paintings, not the fronts. And Scott says, this is even better than the Eiffel Tower.
Is it?
Buddy says, Like, whoever the perpetrators are who did this, I'm just trying to figure out how they got in.
Says the man whose mask lets him pass through walls effortlessly.
Right.
It's like, this technology doesn't exist anywhere else, buddy?
Speaking of babysitting and Buddy, Matt asks Buddy to take Scott and T-Bob to the Eiffel Tower in case there's trouble. And Buddy says to Matt, the only way you can guarantee to keep them out of trouble is to put them in a cage. And Matt's probably thinking, that's not a bad idea. Alex has got some cages. Maybe that's what I should do next time.
Leave him at home in a cage.
Yeah.
The line reading for the actor on this one was awesome because it's like, the only way you can guarantee him to keep it out of trouble is to put him in a cage. Like, it was just, there's a lot of disdain in that. So it's like, Scott and T-Bob can clearly hear you, asshole.
Right.
Like, they're right there. You're not even pretending to whisper. And the other way to do it is maybe stop leaving them to their own devices every single time that you go on international adventures.
The only way you can guarantee to keep them out of trouble is to leave them at home in the care of a responsible adult.
Matt doesn't know any. All the adults he hangs out with are part of his paramilitary group.
Fair point. Well, once getting Buddy and the kid and the robot out of the picture, Matt is investigating. And I'd like to take a moment to note here that all the paintings being turned around is curious, and it's definitely a security violation, but it feels more like a prank than anything else. And so the thing is, Matt is investigating because, as usual, the crime involves his stuff. There's no crime. It's like B&E and, I don't know, what would you call it when you flip paintings around? Vandalism?
Maybe. I mean, but they didn't wreck the paintings. It's like, yeah, the B&E is a crime. And 100% Matt investigating. It's like, you don't fucking touch my stuff. That's a through line for all of his petulance the entire time.
Well, Matt sees an open door, which leads to a storage room, which leads to some underground rooms, possibly the catacombs of Paris. It's really hard to tell. But I'd like to point out, like, there's no dialogue for a good minute of screen time here.
You are 100% right, because like we switch from there. We have a lot of cuts basically in there as you go through the various rooms, and then you go through some exterior shots to the chateau where we find out V.E.N.O.M is. And when I looked at the sequence of shots, I felt like the director was going for something like 3 Days of the Condor or Day of the Jackal in terms of the setup shots without any dialogue and just music. So it was like them trying to express themselves artistically.
Good job showing, not telling. So
all the 8-year-olds caught it.
Meanwhile, in that ornate French chateau, Miles and Cliff are putting the pieces of a large map together on a wall. And Cliff is having a hard time, and it turns out that's because he has his piece of the puzzle upside down. And Miles says, "You cretin." Again, Miles, you really need to be mindful of how you treat your employees.
The brutality Cliff is going to endure in this episode is not okay. And really, Miles, isn't it your fault for letting Cliff do this? And then they have this shot of Miles's face, like where it's hyper close up. And I was like, kids, can you play the game of count the number of Miles's nose hairs?
Well, Vanessa and Sly come in with the final pieces of the map. And Vanessa's wearing a lab coat, which is odd. And also, what have Vanessa and Sly been off doing? And was the lab coat involved?
Kids, what's wrong with this picture? One is Sly's not wearing his sunglasses.
Yep, true.
Vanessa's holding on to some sort of strap.
Yes.
I don't know exactly what that is.
No.
She's wearing a lab coat. And finally, the crankiest, most ornery member has a very pleased look on her face. She's got a little afterglow right there. We can take some guesses at what Sly and Vanessa were doing back there. I don't know if Sly's going to put those glasses back on because he's going to cry, but whatever it is, Vanessa's pretty happy.
Clearly, their relationship is progressing.
Possibly not voluntarily on Sly's part.
So what we learn is that they were in the Louvre last night, and Sly is confused about why they didn't just steal the paintings. Now, Miles smartly points out that they would have been hunted down as art thieves. And my point is, unlike now, where they're surely being hunted down as a terrorist organization?
Yeah, I agree. It would have actually been a fun way to throw people off the scent if they'd stolen one painting to try and, do a misdirect. But no, we're going to turn all the paintings around.
They could have gotten away with this scot-free if they had just turned the paintings back around.
Yeah.
And there would be no mask mission whatsoever. and they would have gotten away with their plan to blackmail the city of Paris. But instead, out of either laziness or spite, they just left it the way it was and ran away. As it turns out, the map points to a triggering device. Now, whatever that is, it promises to make them all wealthy enough to buy every painting in the Louvre, says Miles. We cut to exterior shot of Paris again. Ah, gay Paris again. Buddy is driving Scott and T-Bob to the Eiffel Tower. And Buddy says, wow, it's certainly nice to be driving Hondo's Hurricane. 3 questions for you. 1,
Yes.
do you think Hondo knows? 2, do you think he'll ever find out? 3, what do you think Hondo would do if he found out?
The first thing that came to mind with the first question was the scene in Return of the Jedi where Han Solo's saying, I got your promise, not a scratch. And Lando says back to him, would you just get going, you pirate? With the exception here that Buddy will never be as smooth as Lando.
Right.
And Hondo would not be as timid as Han in this scene. I think there'd be like a real threat if like Hondo knew. It's like, look, it was fine with the F-150 if you dented it, but this is a 57 Chevy Bel Air. Don't scratch it. And in terms of what would Hondo do if it did get scratched, Buddy's in the ravine.
You are dead on. Buddy's in the ravine if Hurricane comes back damaged in any way.
I've wondered about this as a general concept because I wonder if Buddy ever complains that he basically has to, and Hondo for that matter, that they have to share a vehicle. And like if Matt's kind of like comeback is like, but Buddy, your vehicle is all of Boulder Hill. Like you get all of this. And tries to like pass it off in some way that makes it okay as he sees his friends constantly streaming out on exciting missions without him.
Yeah. You repair all the vehicles. So in many ways, all the vehicles are yours, except they're not at all, buddy. So do not drive any of them without my permission. Well, they're driving along, and Scott asks Buddy to pull over at a bakery for some food. Buddy says, it's not like you didn't have breakfast. Scott says, but that was half an hour ago. Now, first of all, Buddy doesn't know if Scott had breakfast, because maybe he didn't. But also, Scott doesn't know when his next meal is or where it'll come from. So it's a smart move by Scott to just intake calories whenever he can.
100%. And I love this shot here because it really felt like, sir, may I have some more?
While Scott's buying some baguettes, Buddy Scott's jackhammer peeling out of the chateau near the bakery. And then he goes to a payphone to call Matt, who answers the call on some random phone in the midst of a huge crowd at the Louvre.
But I also love the idea of Buddy having to go through the phone chain to actually get to Matt at the gala.
Yeah. Did Buddy call collect, or did he have some coins to put in? He's like looking for anything. Like, I didn't even go to currency exchange. How do I?
That's even better.
Call. Where are you calling, sir? The Louvre.
Well, he's going to have to struggle through the French. So he's got a little book with him to try and translate to the operator.
Excusez-moi.
Louvre, collect. I kind of like the idea that Venom chose a hideout right next to a great boulangerie as well.
Yeah, that's great.
And it also is like, hey, Venom's not slumming it anymore. And it kind of made me wonder if it's like, oh, maybe this is a chateau that was owned by that German finance minister, and they're just taking it over while he's in jail.
It's a great question. How do they end up in this place? Because it's not their typical shanty in the woods. Anyways, back to Matt at the party. He tells Buddy, I found something too. And then Buddy cuts him off. Turns out Buddy wants to go into the chateau to investigate. But Matt tells him that he'll join Buddy as soon as he can and to make sure Scott and T-Bob are safely out of there first.
Couple things. When you go to the shot of Matt at this party, I'm like, who the fuck are these people in the background? It's like the weirdest set of losers that they got at this gala.
Everyone, PJ makes all the awesome social media content for the show. Will you please make something out of this? Because this is first of all, there's twins. If you look to the left and to the right, like they have the same exact face profile, only one of them's wearing some sort of a spiffy hat. But other than that, it's a bunch of weirdos at this party.
Well, my other thought was, Matt's checking in to make sure Scott and T-Bob are okay. Who is this guy? We haven't seen this guy before.
I know, right? Who are you and what have you done with Matt? Well, after they end the phone call, remember, Buddy's job is to make sure that Scott and T-Bob are somewhere safe. Buddy asks Scott, "You guys think you can find the Eiffel Tower by yourselves?" Let's track the blame chain here, okay, in case we need it later. 1, Matt entrusted Scott to Buddy. 2, Buddy told them to go to the Eiffel Tower by themselves. Good. Check.
Here's the thing. Like, I'm a little hard pressed to blame Buddy on this one, since Matt has established a very strong pattern of this being an okay result. Like, can you guys go back to the hotel? Or remember that time when Brad left Scott on a cliff in South America? Like, to get down by himself back to the city?
Yeah, it's true. None of them seem to catch any flack for it. Or Scott never tells Matt about it. Buddy rushes into what appears to be a very dirty alleyway with his disguise briefcase. And he says, "I almost can't stand to cover up such a handsome dude." Wow, Buddy. Vain much?
You're supposed to be a master of disguise, sir. Like, this is part of your job. I kind of wondered if this was part of his morning affirmations, is like looking in the mirror and be like, "You're handsome. Don't forget that."
It's okay if Matt doesn't choose you to go on missions. You're good enough. And you're handsome enough. Turns out Buddy disguises himself as Cliff Dagger. He climbs up onto the roof of a neighboring building, then zip lines across to the roof of the chateau. It was a very Mission Impossible sequence here.
It really was. I thought it was fun. I enjoyed this.
Now, he spots the map on the wall inside the chateau, and he looks shocked.
Okay. I had a question, Adam. Have you ever gone into a room and maybe it has a map of a town or like a ski slope and just look shocked at it? I was really confused at why he looked shocked at a map with no context in it whatsoever.
No, agreed. Unless it said, "Map to bombs underneath Paris." Which maybe it does. I don't know.
Maybe it does. Cliff put that on there because he just needs the labeling.
Well, Cliff encounters Buddy in disguise in the map room, and Cliff says, "Hey, what am I doing here?" And a chase ensues. And I just want to ask you, did you notice how bad the Foley sound is for the running? It's like a pair of tap shoes, but not even really. It's like a pair of like plastic tap shoes on a kitchen counter or something.
Yeah, it was awful.
Buddy attempts to crash through the window.
Yeah, so Buddy attempts to crash through the window, like with a shoulder going into it.
Yeah.
Doesn't budge at all. And then somehow he is swinging on a rope, Spider-Man style, to leap over the real cliff. It is the biggest non sequitur scene.
Like, where'd the rope come from?
Why is it swinging there? Should we be concerned for Cliff's mental health?
Maybe that was left over from Sly and Vanessa.
Oh, no.
Well, Miles says, after him, he's a spy. He saw the map. And Buddy's just hauling ass towards the front gate. Sly uses stiletto, fires at the gate, causing this big metal spiked gate to slowly start coming down. Now, Buddy would get out without a problem, except he trips on a rock and falls, and he's about to get crushed by the gate.
Given that Sly had enough time to get his mask, this would be a great time for Viper and Whip if you're trying to stop this guy.
True, and I found it funny that they didn't aim at Buddy, they aimed at the gate.
Which is a harder target.
Which ended up being a very kind of Austin Powers as it's slowly coming down. Yeah. But anyways, it does lead me to ask the question, what's going to happen?
I don't know. I think Buddy's in real trouble if he moves at a snail's pace. A lot of danger here.
M.A.S.K will be right back, and so will V.E.N.O.M. Now back to M.A.S.K.
And we're back. When we left you, we were about to see the final moments of Agent Buddy Hawks. Thing is, he really has a lot of time, as we pointed out, he could have gotten up and ran away, right?
I didn't really have any idea why he decided just to lay there and take it. And I wondered if he had a death wish. If he was like, he was tired of watching the M.A.S.K vehicles constantly go on cool adventures while he's left behind.
This will teach Matt to forget about me. I'll get badly injured, and then he'll care about me, and then he'll notice. Well, Matt pulls up in Thunderhawk, and instead of blowing up the gate, he ejects the tire weapon from Hurricane, which magically lodges itself between the ground and the bottom of the gate, saving Buddy. And I thought at least it wasn't a Deus Ex helmet moment.
It's true. It's a Deus Ex tire. I thought it was great. Did you notice that the button to launch the rear tire is actually disguised as part of the radio?
Yeah.
Do you want to place it there? What if Scott wants to change the radio and listen to some Devo?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how often is it that tire gets accidentally ejected? Well, Miles says they're on to us. We have to put the plan into action now. They were just having some unscheduled downtime. Well, all right, they're on to us. I guess we better start working. Buddy tells Matt, "You're never going to guess what I saw in there." And Matt replies, "You mean this?" And Matt shows him a picture of the map. So Buddy's entire gambit inside the chateau was for nothing?
Yeah, it makes you wonder, Buddy, what if you hadn't cut Matt off earlier and let Matt finish his sentence about I found something? Like maybe you'd been a little bit better off and could have tailed Venom secretly.
So it turns out that Matt took the map off the back of 20 paintings in the museum. So it truly was idiotic of Miles not to turn the paintings back over after he got the maps. And also, while they're driving, Matt has the computer play Buddy a video explainer. But remember, Buddy's driving, and this does not seem like a good idea, does it, for Buddy to be driving while also watching a video explainer of what's actually going on here.
This is distracted driving at its best. Matt doesn't care. He's just going to play this video and hope that Buddy is capable enough to drive as well as listen to this like historical monologue we're about to get to.
Yeah, and it is a monologue. The computer goes into one of those exhausting monologues.
During World War II, the French resistance hid those paintings so that Hitler would not take them. During the German occupation of Paris, Hitler planted a network of bombs under the city in the sewers. He planned to blow up Paris if the Allies should try to march in. The bombs were to be triggered from a distance by this device, a shortwave radio trigger hidden in a sealed bunker. A member of the resistance learned of the locations of the bombs and wrote them down on the backs of the hidden paintings.
I mean, it's kind of like, all right, 8-year-olds, I hope you caught all of that and are up on your World War II history to understand this. It did make me wonder, like in the universe of M.A.S.K, the Allies did end up entering Paris. So why weren't the bombs detonated?
Exactly.
If you're going to go this deep into it, like where it's like, hey, we've just given you like a history lesson, you might as well say that the reason why they need this trigger is because it's like the bomb signal uses something like the Enigma encryption code to actually transmit the signal, which justifies the uniqueness of the trigger. And where did the computer get all this information from?
That's the question I have.
Yeah.
No one's ever heard about this before. No one knows about the bombs or anything like this. Matt gets a map from the back of 20 paintings, and suddenly the computer said, has the computer known all this somehow for all this time, and it's just been holding back?
Way to be proactive, computer.
The computer wraps up its monologue by saying, a member of the resistance learned of the locations of the bombs and wrote them down on the backs of the painting. So why didn't he just disarm the bombs? If they knew about them after the war, why weren't the bombs disarmed?
Yeah, I had a pet theory to try and suture this. What if the member of the resistance actually, when he discovered this, figured out how much power he could have? So he wrote them down so he could threaten Paris, but then died like before he was able to. So he actually intentionally was going to use this as some kind of power play after the war. It also made me wonder, though, because we've wondered so much about Miles in the past. How did he find out of the connection of these paintings, the maps, the bombs? And again, say what you will about Miles, he has a knack for finding lost shit.
It could be safe to say that Miles has the same access to this computer knowledge, seeing as he stole the M.A.S.K technology. Maybe the AI is a part of that somehow. Again, Writers Defense Fund nominee here, but maybe, and that's how it helps him find this stuff.
So I think it's a really good point, because imagine, again, in a pre-murdering Andy Trakker world, Miles knows, and we'll get into at Panda Poo my theory on this, he basically knows about all this weird shit. And he's put it into the computer to try and go after these things. And so you're right. It is basically the computer latently has this stuff. And it's only when it comes up in a Venom context that it's actually utilized.
Well, Buddy, like me, by the way, wonders why they would put these maps on the back of priceless paintings. And Matt's explanation is, it was probably the only thing available to make notes on at the time. Really? Didn't have any paper at all?
Look, all the paper was being used as toilet paper. And the only thing that wasn't being used as toilet paper were these paintings.
Great. Let's desecrate priceless pieces of art by putting maps on the back of them. Well, anyway, Venom is now after the trigger device. And Matt says if they find it first, they'll have the city of Paris in the palm of their dirty hands. So here we go. Matt setting the stakes of the mission for the win.
Yeah, I had this question. Like, if you know the bombs are out there, why not alert the authorities of Paris to just start the disarming process? Start throwing some bodies out there just to start disarming these bombs.
Yeah, they know it's in the sewers, so just start looking.
No, they have the map. Like, Matt's
That's right,
got
they
the
have
map.
the map now. Right.
You can hand it to the Parisian authorities and say, hey, guys, I'll try and stop these guys. Why don't you start disarming these things under your city?
Yeah, great point.
The other thought I had is if you're Venom and you know where the bombs are, I don't want to overstate this. It's actually decently easy to create something to blow up a bomb. You could create a whole different triggering mechanism.
Yeah, the thing was designed in World War II. So I would assume 40 years later, they have the capability of developing something better to trigger those bombs. Notably, there has been no agent selection scene as of yet. And I will point out that we do not get an agent selection scene in this episode at all.
We don't. And you and I have talked about this in a theoretical sense of wanting to have an episode where it's Matt and one other agent against the world. And we've talked about this. It could have been Hondo with The Matter of Gravity. It'd been even better if it was Gloria and Matt in Vegas as kind of like honeymoon adventure. But we don't. We get Buddy and Matt in Paris.
Yeah. It would have been great to have Matt and Gloria in Paris, right? They're on a little getaway, romantic getaway, and then suddenly something happens. Yeah, the Pandora's box that opens is if they weren't prepared for a mission, we know why Thunderhawk's there. But why did they have Hurricane there? And in that case, why was Buddy even there anyways? Generally speaking, it's Matt, Scott, and T-Bob on a family trip, with many exceptions to that.
Yeah.
But of course, doesn't matter to the M.A.S.K writers. We're just going to go ahead and plow forward here. Thunderhawk and Hurricane, they drive into the sewers of Paris, and they go down a perfect ramp into a perfectly sized archway. And I was just wondering, does Paris have a lot of easy-to-access sewer tunnels that a car can drive through?
I'm sorry, Adam. We have to do a commercial break here and just thank Trakker Infrastructure for their sponsorship of this show and all the great work they do throughout every city internationally, including creating giant size entryways into sewers.
That's right. If you need a giant entryway into your local sewer, the only place to call, Trakker Infrastructure. And we thank you for your sponsorship of this episode.
Now back to the show.
Suddenly, they encounter Jackhammer and Piranha in the sewers. And Matt says, where there's rats, you're going to find the cheese. And Buddy says, I think you've been hanging around Bruce too long. So I'm going to go ahead and nominate Buddy for his own award for that jab.
It's 100%. Buddy, that was unnecessary, man. Truly. You just decided to take an opportunity to shit on Bruce when he wasn't around.
We have a great M.A.S.K Venom battle in the sewers. Lots of laser rays firing away. Some solid wall driving happens there. We have Hurricane doing a 180, splashing water into Cliff's face, causing him to lose control of Jackhammer. But Cliff is wearing a mask, so I'm not sure how that happened.
I don't know, man. It's just like the mud covered up the optical sensor for a second. Cliff only has one eye.
Meanwhile, Scott and T-Bob are wandering Paris, unable to find the Eiffel Tower. Hard to miss. But anyways, they come upon the giant archway that leads into the sewers, and Scott is psyched. We can go exploring. And this is exactly why I worried about the giant inviting archway that leads into the sewers, because it seems to me like, similar to Scott, a lot of people would be like, oh, cool. Let me go walking into this inviting archway and see what's in the sewers.
I probably wouldn't, without a flashlight, go wandering into a random sewer. But Scott has a penchant for playing in trash heaps and apparently sewers, which begs the question, why, Adam? Why does he do this?
He needs something, just any kind of stimulus. And so he, like Gloria, goes to the extremes, right? He's not an adrenaline junkie. He just needs to push things to the extreme because he is so overstimulated by everything that happens in his life. So junkyards, trash heaps, sewers, those are the places Scott wants to play, where other children just want to sit on a swing set.
That's a good point, man. The shot that is involved with Scott standing before the sewer entry, like, I tried to do a little figuring out by doing a screenshot and then taking guesses at the relative size of like Scott and this entryway. I took a guess if Scott's 4 feet tall, maybe 5. Actually, let's say he's 4 feet tall. The opening is 20 feet tall. If he's 5 feet, it's like a 25. It's like 2.5 stories of an opening to a sewer. Why?
So that people and vehicles can enter. We all know the stories about Paris and the famous sewers. Have you not been on a sewer tour of Paris, PJ? I'm shocked. It's the Eiffel Tower, the Louvre, and the giant sewer tunnels. Boy. And I know you live in the mountains of Colorado, but I didn't think you were that uncultured.
I'm sorry. Apparently, I will do a better job next time I go to a major city of asking for their finest sewer tour.
T-Bob, outside the tunnel entrance, stumbles into something covered in a tarp, and the tarp falls off, revealing Switchblade. And I feel that's a terrible place to hide a multi-million-dollar weapon of mass destruction.
Yeah, it really is.
But anyways, we're back with Miles and Venom, and he uses Viper to break his way into the secret Nazi bunker. And now he's got his hands on the trigger device. And he says, now I can destroy Paris at the touch of a button. But do you think this device still works after 40 years?
I definitely had the thought you might want to replace the batteries in there, Miles. Like, if it's there. Because and truthfully, like, if the batteries had corroded, because if there were batteries, because there's no visible electrical connection, they would have been lead acid. So they probably would have eaten through. And if it was anywhere near the circuitry, it's done. But I'll say this much on the other side of it, though. On the bombs themselves, the explosives are a credible threat. And the material in there can last a century or longer. And I did a little research. Unexploded ordnance from World War II is still a problem to this day. The last event that happened was from December 3rd of 2024. We still have to contend with these unexploded bombs 80 years later.
Well, Scott radios Matt to tell him that he found Switchblade at the entrance to the sewers. Matt orders Scott to go to the Eiffel Tower where it's safe.
So go to the most notable landmark in the city, which is under a terrorist threat. Father of the Year moment.
Agreed. That's up for nomination for sure. Well, Miles takes off in Switchblade and makes an announcement to the people of Paris. But he's in Switchblade, a helicopter/jet. I guess Switchblade has a loudspeaker with enough oomph behind it to be heard by the entire city.
So, again, this is Writers' Defense Fund Award. But I was wondering if he's also tapping into the television radio network signals as well, because what he's about to say otherwise could get garbled and no one might not actually hear him.
Okay. Let's give Miles that. He says, you have 1 hour to pay me $1 billion or the city will be reduced to rubble. That's a very solid threat, Miles. Well done. If I can point one thing out, though, generally you want to prove you have the capability of doing something before making the threat. So blowing up a little something just to prove, because I could go out right now, PJ, and I could say, City of Los Angeles, give me $1 billion or else the city will be reduced to rubble. And people would just look at me and then continue on with their lives.
It's a really excellent point. You need to give a little taste there. The other question I had, Adam, is how many people are actually able to understand him, given that he's speaking in English and many of them might not. There might be just speaking, like they're just French speakers. Like, what? Who cares?
So a madman is shouting to them in a foreign language they don't understand about money that isn't in their currency, or else a threat that has not been demonstrated will be carried out. So, in theory, a very solid threat by Miles. In execution, very poor indeed.
Yeah, but he's also done this before, like Tokyo with the magma mole. He showed off the threat first.
Well, Scott and T-Bob, they watch from atop the Eiffel Tower. I'm curious how they got there since they were lost for the whole episode. But anyways, and they're watching as Thunderhawk faces off against Switchblade and Manta in a sky battle.
So Matt very intentionally is going towards the Eiffel Tower. And I had a question. Why was he doing that when he told Scott to go there?
He has a very short memory. To your point, a stray laser blast from Manta hits one of the Eiffel Tower's legs, and the tower begins to fall with Scott and T-Bob atop it. But Buddy pulls up and uses Hurricane's laser cannon to somehow fuse the leg back together again. And this is the second time we've seen M.A.S.K lasers do something like this. Like, how is this possible?
So we're going to have to do a mini science corner here. So
Yeah.
when you want to weld things together, you have something that is incredibly hot, whether it be a butane torch or an arc welder, it's something sufficient to melt metal. So you have to start off with this belief that the lasers are sufficiently hot enough to melt the steel to fuse it together. When that they fire over a distance, they don't lose so much power that they're not sufficient. And again, so people know power goes down as the square of the distance. So if you get 1x the power over some distance, if you increase that distance by 2x, you actually get 1/4 the power. So you have to actually be firing an incredibly hot beam to melt that. And it has to be sufficiently strong metal at the source of the cannon that it doesn't get melted as well. So whatever space material they've got there, like it is like they're firing a fucking hot laser that is able to fuse steel from like a kilometer away, half a kilometer. I don't know, but it's immensely tough to like pull all of that off.
Yeah. Okay. Granted.
Now, if you accept that, let's also consider that fixing the Eiffel Tower afterwards is going to be really expensive.
Indeed. Who could do it?
We just want to take a moment and thank Trakker Construction for their sponsorship of this show. Trakker Construction, when your massively large metal landmark, precious to your city, gets wrecked, we're there to help you out.
Yeah, that's right, PJ. In this day and age when monuments around the world are threatened by any combination of natural disasters or multinational terrorist organizations, it's good to know that Trakker Construction is there to help with the cleanup. And thank you, Trakker Construction, for your sponsorship of this episode. Well, M.A.S.K is outnumbered 2-1 during the battle. Thunderhawk takes a direct hit from Switchblade and is forced to land, but somehow it's okay because it takes off a second later with Buddy on board. Now, we have a very interesting use of a M.A.S.K power here. Buddy uses Penetrator, allowing them and Thunderhawk to phase through Switchblade and grab the trigger device. But here's my question. So if they're phasing through Switchblade, how are they able to grab a solid object at the same time? So is there even a magic science corner that can explain this?
So let's jump back to Science Corner, and I'm going to try my best because
Okay.
Let's talk about how Penetrator might work in the first place, okay? Buckle up, folks. So thanks to quantum physics, and so people know quantum physics is this fucked up, non-intuitive subject that makes up the universe. And Newtonian physics exists in this very small island where humans live that kind of approximates everything else. And if you get too small or too big or too fast or too slow, you're in quantum physics land. And that's most of the universe. We live, again, in this really tiny island here. Regardless, quantum physics tells us that atoms, or the building block of matter, they're made up mostly of empty space, okay? There really isn't very much to atoms. And so if that's true, why don't atoms just pass through each other all the time, Penetrator style? Well, there's this concept called the Pauli exclusion principle, which states that no two fermions, so like an electron, actually protons and neutrons fall under that as well, can occupy the same quantum state. And it means that it creates a repulsive force when the atoms get too close. So this prevents objects from passing through each other. But what is a quantum state? It really describes properties like position and spin, okay? So how does Penetrator work? So we're going to go to space magic at this point in time because I don't know how they do this. So you're going to have to believe that Penetrator works because you want them occupying the same position. The only way it could work is basically changing the spin of the fermions, so the electrons, the protons, the neutrons, so that no two fermions have the same spin at the same time and therefore can occupy the same position. And you're just fucking with the wave functions in a really hardcore way. And you have to do it in such a way you don't accidentally create antiparticles like antiprotons or positrons, where they would just annihilate the thing they're actually encountering. So if you believe all of this, how it actually works,
and if you understand and have followed along,
if you followed along on my really shitty explanation of this corner of space magic, in going through Switchblade, Buddy has to be able to phase and then unphase and rephase his hand at just the right time to snag the trigger device and not accidentally hit Miles's crotch. So this is a really exquisitely timed maneuver. Otherwise, basically, Miles is going to have a whole lot of other problems at the same time, but to just grab this trigger device. So,
not to mention potentially some sort of quantum explosion above the city.
This goes wrong, basically, like the Switchblade and Thunderhawk explode and the respective leaders are dead, which might be not a bad thing.
Well, Scott's watching all this from the top of the Eiffel Tower, but the Eiffel Tower starts falling again. And Scott actually tells M.A.S.K to go after V.E.N.O.M. He says, don't let them get away. And Scott at least has the right idea here. And he's actually saying it while atop a structurally unstable Eiffel Tower. So he's got some cojones as well.
He does. Maybe he's tired of this M.A.S.K V.E.N.O.M battle. And it's, look, Dad, just get it over with.
Yeah. Matt decides to save his son and let V.E.N.O.M get away. And so he jumps out of Thunderhawk and uses Spectrum hang glider to rescue Scott and T-Bob while Buddy lands Thunderhawk. And once they're on the ground, Scott tells Matt that he should have gone after V.E.N.O.M. And again, Scott, right on the money.
It's true. And it really makes you wonder what kind of death wish Scott has at this point in time, whereas he'd rather see his father go after V.E.N.O.M than rescue himself.
Yeah, he's getting a lot of Gloria in him now. He's really starting to feel the adrenaline junkie nature of life.
Do you think he's worried about his father actually rescuing him? Because we've seen a few times now that when Scott's about to fall, Matt's first instinct is to fire lasers at the thing that's about to fall.
We'll take the stairs. Well, Matt, Scott, T-Bob, and Buddy are sitting at a cafe. Turns out the bombs have been defused and all is well. And T-Bob says that he wants to go see the Casbah. It turns out that his map was of Algiers this whole time, which is why they couldn't find the Eiffel Tower. And everyone laughs. So kind of a Roy Batty moment here?
I thought so. I wasn't sure if this implied that T-Bob actually doesn't know how to read, and like how sad it would be if he wasn't programmed to do that, and how angry he would be that he wasn't programmed to do that. Did M.A.S.K defuse those bombs themselves, or did they actually finally tell the authorities about them?
Yeah, who defused the bombs?
Did he finally turn over to the authorities and say, oh, go defuse these? Or did Matt do it himself?
Or did Matt say, yeah, they're diffused. Don't worry about it. Yeah, Trakker demolition might need them in the future. So we go to the more you know. We're at the Trakker mansion at night. And Scott is soldering T-Bob's head for some reason. T-Bob kind of jumps, causing the soldering iron to land on a piece of paper, which starts a fire. Scott picks up the phone, and the next thing we know, there's 3 fire trucks outside putting out the fire. And the lesson Scott reveals to us is to make sure that you have the fire department number nearby. I'd like to point out 3 things here.
Yes.
First, we learned that Scott has his own lab, which must be very nice. He lives in a big mansion, has his own lab, 10-year-old. Great. Second, 3 fire trucks show up to put out a piece of paper that caught on fire. So Matt does not mess around with his property. And finally, 3, Scott could have easily put that fire out by himself. I mean, it was a piece of paper that caught on fire, which even if Scott didn't put it out himself, probably would have just extinguished on its own because it's a piece of paper, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
Here's actually just something I just realized. Do you think this is a private fire department that Matt keeps on retainer on his property?
Yes, I think it is a private fire department that Matt keeps on his property, and that's why they all show up to put out a piece of paper that's burning.
So the number Scott needed to remember was 3.
Right.
Like,
Trakker Fire Department. How can I help you? It's Scott. Say no more. We're on our way.
look, it's a good lesson. I know what they're trying to go for, but it's a really poor demonstration of it. Here's an important thing. Why doesn't his lab, which contains electrical equipment, have at least a fire extinguisher or a fire blanket inside of it?
Or sprinklers.
In my garage, I've got like 3 fire extinguishers, 2 fire blankets, just in case.
You do some unusual things in your garage, and I'll just leave the audience to wonder what PJ does in his garage up there in the mountains. But anyways, folks, let's look at our awards for the episode. The Buddy Hawks Award.
He wins his own award pretty handily with the Bruce comment. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like,
I agree. There is no need to diss Bruce in that moment, and yet he chose to. So an unabashed Buddy Hawks Award. Congratulations, sir. Father of the Year.
I think there's a few nominees for this. Matt trusting Scott and T-Bob to Buddy right after Buddy makes the comment that he should be put into a cage. Like, that would be a solid one and a winner in every episode. But I really thought Matt ordering Scott to the Eiffel Tower while the city was under terrorist threat because he said it's safe really was the thing that takes it away for Father of the Year for me.
Sure. You just opened up a new dimension for me, though. And I think I'm going to go with Matt entrusting Scott and T-Bob to Buddy after having said the cage comment. Because Matt's like, this man wants to put my son in a cage. He's perfect for watching over my son. So I'm going to go with that one. I don't think we had a Sly Rax Ragdoll Award here.
No, I don't think so. There's a near miss for Scott. Had he fallen, it's an easy Sly Rax, but he didn't. He's just hanging off the side with T-Bob with the Eiffel Tower.
And finally, Roy Batty Award. What do you think?
I think it's that tail end bit where it's making fun of T-Bob's inability to read.
I could understand someone afraid of a robot uprising would not want robots to know how to read. But I agree with you there. So let's figure it out. Is this episode Panda Poo or not?
I'm going to tell you, so I'm going to give a weird analogy. I really like the movie David Lynch's Dune.
Yeah.
And it's not a good movie. It's a bad movie, but it's almost great. And there's a few places where it just kind of misses. And honestly, there's a lot of intriguing stuff in this episode. They do the fun Mission Impossible bit. We've got this like weird discussion to be had about the Nazi bombs, which honestly was like, if you're not going to deepen the lore in that case, like Venom could have just planted bombs and you'd have effectively the same result. So there's a lot of places where you could take it somewhere interesting and it doesn't go. There's a credible threat from Venom. We get a great use of Penetrator with the quantum magic that we've get there. But outside of that, like so many different ways I wish this episode could have gone. So for me, it is Panda Poo.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you on that one and just say it's not the worst we've ever had. It's wasted potential. So yeah, another Panda Poo episode.
I do have a meta discussion though around Miles because like so many times where it's Miles, maps, and ancient civilizations, artifacts, something hidden. What is Miles hiding about his past? Either explicitly now or implicitly, we've got this Nazi strain that is just infused in these episodes. And so, like, I kind of wondered to myself, like, all right, who else was obsessed with ancient civilizations? Like you see in Book of Power or Star Chariot or what we have here. Like, is Miles somehow connected to Himmler?
It's a great question. Miles, what do you think? He probably would have been in his 20s, or very early 20s, late teens, early 20s during the Second World War, especially near the end of the Second World War, right? So, yeah, there's a possibility. He doesn't have a German accent. Doesn't mean that he's not German. So, possibly, I'd like to follow this thread.
Yeah, I mean, how did he know about the map to find the Nazi gold when they were in South America? You don't stumble upon that accidentally. And then you don't stumble upon this accidentally. You don't stumble upon the Star Chariot accidentally or every ancient civilization like that we've seen. It's like, what body of research did he have available to him that makes all this possible? And I feel like this is again, part of that missing bit of just like, who is this Miles Mayhem? Why does he have access to all this stuff?
Yeah, the other thing about, with Venom, compare him to Cobra, is I feel like Venom doesn't have a core goal overall in the series. They're just kind of like every episode it's kind of a different thing. It's like Venom's just trying to make ends meet. Like
it's true.
That's their goal, is just to survive to the next day.
I mean, one thing we've seen a lot is Miles is after money. And Maybe if Matt paid him off, that would be the end of it.
Yeah. Matt should just cut him in on the money. Well, let's see what Venom's up to in episode 35 next week. The episode is called In Dutch. A madman hires Venom to destroy the flood dikes in the Netherlands if their parliament doesn't allow him a political position. Oh, boy.
I'm looking forward to this. I have not watched this episode yet. I love the mechanics already from the tagline. And I think we'll have a lot to say there. We're staying on our European vacation, though.
We are, yeah. I have not seen the Netherlands yet, so I'm looking forward to seeing the canals and whoever this politician is. We will see you in Holland next week, but for now, this podcast has to transform and head back to HQ. I am Adam Moore.
And I am PJ McNerney.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The Mobile Armored Podcast Show is written, produced, and edited by Adam Moore and PJ McNerney.